Gravel tore into Emily's bare feet as she sprinted through the darkness, each step sharper than the fear that already clawed her chest. Shadows loomed, stretching like claws across the ground, chasing her breath with cruel rhythm. She whispered, "I can't let them take me back," her words broken like the night itself. A door slammed behind her, its echo splitting the silence with finality, sealing away the world she had barely escaped. The scent of iron and smoke clung to the cold air, thickening with every heartbeat. She remembered Daniel's voice, velvet and venom, saying, "Your freedom is an illusion." Those words crawled into her skull, louder than her pulse, heavier than her chains. Emily stumbled, palms scraping raw against stone, but she forced herself up, her lungs burning as if the night itself wanted to strangle her. Somewhere behind, the enforcer's heavy boots pounded, steady, merciless, promising capture. Ahead, the forest loomed, blacker than despair, its twisted branches whispering a choice between death and deliverance. Emily gasped, each breath sharp as knives in her throat. The forest swallowed sound, every rustle too loud, every silence unbearable. Her body shook and she whispered, "Keep moving, don't stop," though fear pressed against her ribs like iron. She thought of Lily, the child's laughter once pure before the chance drowned it out. "I can't let her be lost," Emily told herself, clutching the thought like a weapon. A crack of wood echoed behind her, the enforcer close. His voice rumbled, "You can't run forever." Her pulse thundered, her legs weak, but the memory of Daniel's hand on her shoulder, cold and commanding, forced her forward. She reached for strength buried beneath years of submission. The forest branches clawed at her skin, yet they also pointed toward freedom. Her eyes locked on the faint shimmer of moonlight beyond the thicket. For the first time, her terror bent into defiance. Branches tore across Emily's arms, carving thin lines of pain. She clenched her jaw, forcing silence, though her chest begged for release. Behind her, the steady rhythm of pursuit continued, cruelly patient. She remembered Daniel saying, "Pain purifies, fear binds." His words had once comforted her, now they poisoned her marrow. She spat into the dirt, as if to rid herself of his presence. A flash of movement caught her eye, a figure in the trees, watching. The silent observer, face hidden, did not move. Emily's heart stuttered, unsure if friend or foe. She whispered, "Help me," but the forest gave back only her echo. The silence was unbearable, her trust splintering. With shaking legs, she forced herself forward, refusing to be trapped by hesitation. Survival demanded motion, and motion became her prayer. The ground shifted under Emily's steps, damp soil sinking like quicksand. She steadied herself against a tree, her breath ragged. Memories stormed her mind, the chants in unison, the suffocating rules, the false promises of belonging. She remembered Sarah, the rebel within, whispering, "One day we run." Sarah's voice felt alive in her ears, a spark against the cold. Behind her, the enforcer's steps grew louder, closer, unyielding. Panic screamed, but a deeper strength rose. Emily clenched her fists, blood seeping from torn palms, and hissed, "Not tonight." The forest seemed to listen, its silence broken only by the distant call of an owl. For the first time, the night did not feel like her enemy, but an ally. Emily's lungs threatened collapse as she reached the river's edge. The water glistened, black and merciless, a mirror of her fear. Behind her, footsteps pounded, closing in like a death knell. She remembered the chants, the endless circle of obedience, the chains of love twisted into servitude. She whispered, "This ends here." Her reflection shimmered in the current, broken and fractured, yet alive. The river roared, daring her to leap, to risk drowning for the chance of freedom. The enforcer's shadow stretched long across the ground, his voice a growl. "Come back, Emily." Her heart thudded against her chest, a drumbeat of rebellion. She stepped closer to the edge, arms trembling, her will forged by terror and courage alike. In that breathless instant, she understood that survival was not just escape, it was defiance. Dawn bled slowly into the trees, and Emily realized the night had not killed her hope. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest and whispered, "You wanted a family, remember?" The word tasted like smoke and honey. She saw the first day again, the banners fluttering, the smiling faces, the promise of belonging. Daniel had stepped from the crowd with a soft voice that curled around her grief. He said, "You were sent to us." She had wanted to believe more than she wanted to breathe. The meals were warm, the prayers gentle, the rules simple at first. She told herself the weight on her shoulders was love, not a leash. Lily's laugh had sealed it, a bright bell inside gray days. The ache of the world quieted, and Emily mistook silence for peace. Now the memories scraped like broken glass, but it also lit a path she refused to lose. They called it Fellowship Night, and candles lined the hall like stars caught in jars. Emily remembered the first hymn, how her voice shook, then steadied under the swell of others. Daniel said, "You are safe here," as he pressed bread into her hand. The enforcer stood beside the door like a shadow pretending to sleep. She told herself he guarded them from the world, not from themselves. After the hymn, Daniel touched her shoulder and asked about her losses. She answered, and the room leaned closer as if to hold her. The story spilled out, and with it the need to belong. She mistook compassion for a net, and she stepped gladly into it. In the glow her doubts shrank, and the hall smelled of wax and warm bread, and something almost holy. Days blurred into rituals that felt like lullabies stitched with thread too tight. Morning chores, shared meals, evening lessons about surrender and trust. Emily told herself routine was healing, and she learned the chants by heart. Daniel said, "Discipline is love," and the phrase rooted deep as a prayer. Lily clung to her hand during tasks, asking about the outside with bright curiosity. Emily answered softly, trying not to break the spell they were sold. The silent observer drifted at the edge of every gathering, eyes down, ears open. Emily wondered what those eyes had already seen, and what they had learned to forget. She folded her fear into smaller shapes, then hid them under obedience. It felt like safety, until it felt like silence. The first warning came as a kindness wrapped in a rule. Daniel said, "Outsiders break what we build," and the circle nodded like wheat in wind. Emily felt the breeze shift but stayed in place. Sarah brushed past her after lesson, a spark in her voice hidden by a smile. She whispered, "Meet me at the well tonight." Emily carried that whisper all day like contraband light. When night fell, the enforcer patrolled with the patience of a hunter. Emily stood at the well and asked, "Why me?" Sarah answered, "Because you still ask why." The word why felt dangerous and sweet. For a heartbeat, Emily remembered she had a spine. Sarah spoke in shards, each one a truth that cut but also freed. She said, "Devotion here costs yourself," and Emily felt the ground tilt. Sarah told of punishments hidden behind hymns, of secrets traded for obedience. Emily listened, heart pounding, torn between gratitude and dread. She asked, "Why tell me?" And Sarah answered, "Because Lily watches you." The name rang like a bell again, bright and impossible to ignore. Emily understood that love could be a rescue or a cage, depending on its keeper. She promised, "I will not let her drown in our silence." The sentence scared her and steadied her. In the hush between footsteps, a plan began to breathe. Morning broke with cold discipline, and the courtyard filled with voices that were less like prayer and more like command. Emily bent her head as the chant rolled over her skin, each word heavy as stone. Daniel's voice rose above the rest, calm and absolute, declaring, "Obedience is freedom." She clenched her jaw, but her lips moved with the others, betraying her rebellion beneath the surface. Lily clung to her hand, her small body trembling, eyes searching for safety in a place that offered none. The enforcer circled the line of followers, boots striking rhythm like a war drum, daring anyone to falter. Emily felt Sarah's gaze from across the crowd, sharp as a blade hidden in silence. The silent observer watched from the back, eyes sunken, lips pressed tight, his stillness more frightening than noise. Emily's heart beat louder than the chant, and with each thud she asked herself how long before silence became her grave. The chant ended, but silence carried more weight than words. Daniel stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the crowd like a blade across necks. He spoke softly. "A true family needs no secrets." Emily's stomach knotted as her thoughts screamed louder than her voice dared. The enforcer dragged a man from the line, his arm twisted behind his back, face pale with terror. He had been caught with a note, and the punishment was meant for all eyes. Daniel smiled with gentle cruelty, saying, "We prune the diseased branch to protect the tree." The man sobbed, and Emily's breath froze in her lungs. Lily buried her face against Emily's arm, muffling her fear. Sarah's fists clenched at her sides, her body rigid with silent fury. Emily forced herself not to move, not to reveal the rebellion stirring inside her chest like fire hidden beneath ash. They marched the punished man toward the barn, the crowd forced to follow in silence. Emily's steps dragged, but her grip on Lily tightened with every echo of boots against soil. Daniel walked ahead, lantern swaying though daylight had already risen, a symbol of control rather than need. The enforcer shoved the man forward, and the sound of his cries mixed with the crunch of gravel. Inside the barn, the air reeked of old hay and rusted tools, thick with dread. Daniel's voice carried, calm as ever, "Sacrifice is love." The silent observer leaned against a beam, eyes closed, but his hands trembled slightly, betraying what he could not speak. Emily swallowed bile, her throat raw with unspoken rage. She whispered inside her skull, "Remember this. Remember everything." The cruelty had ceased being ritual. It was the cage tightening link by link. The punishment began with chants, each voice trembling but refusing to falter. Daniel watched, satisfied as the man's cries echoed against the wood. Emily forced herself to look, because looking away felt like surrender. Lily clutched her tighter, whispering, "Make it stop," her voice so soft it broke Emily's heart. Sarah turned her face slightly, tears shining in the dim light, though her body remained rigid. The enforcer struck with methodical force, each blow followed by Daniel's calm affirmation, "Pain is the teacher." Emily felt her nails dig into her palms until they bled, the sting anchoring her against despair. The silent observer finally opened his eyes, gaze haunted, a silent plea buried in the lines of his face. The barn seemed to hold its breath, the cruelty echoing longer than sound itself. When it ended, silence fell heavier than the violence itself. The man lay broken, breaths shallow, his sobs muted by exhaustion. Daniel turned to the crowd, his smile gentle as he said, "He will rise stronger, and so will you." Emily's stomach churned, her faith cracking like brittle glass. Lily trembled in her arms, her innocence stained by sights no child should hold. Sarah's eyes locked with Emily's across the dim barn, a vow passing between them without words. The silent observer lowered his gaze, shame folding his shoulders inward. The enforcer stood rigid, face unreadable, though his jaw clenched tight enough to crack bone. Emily whispered within, "If this is love, then love is a weapon." She carried that thought like a blade, sharper with every step back into the morning light. Night wrapped the records shed in a hush that tasted like risk and iron. Emily slipped inside, palms humming with the echo of the barn. Papers rustled like frightened birds as she searched the shelves. Sarah had said, "Look where the light never touches." The phrase felt like a key, and her fingers found a false plank. She lifted it and saw ledgers fat with numbers and names that did not belong. Daniel's handwriting flowed like silk around sums that could build a city of lies. A tin box held a voice recorder, a vial of smoke oil, and a folded locket. Emily breathed, "Show me." As she opened the locket to a baby's photo marked with a date and 2 initials. The door clicked, and the silent observer stepped from shadow, face solemn. He said, "Lily was taken from a woman who tried to flee, and the world tiled." Emily's heart cracked, then sharpened. He added, "Daniel calls it destiny. I call it theft." Her fear turned into a blade. At dawn, the bell tolled with a joy that felt wrong in Emily's bones. Daniel stood before the circle, arms open as if to bless the sky. He said, "Today we anoint a pure vessel," and the air tightened. Emily felt Lily's hand slide into hers, small and trusting, and she nearly broke. Sarah whispered, "This is the move that hides a crime." Daniel called Lily's name and spoke of sacred lineage and chosen blood. The words dripped like honey over a pit. Emily swallowed a cry and saw the ledgers in her mind, their digits marching like soldiers. The silent observer stood apart, eyes glassed with a grief he would not own. Emily said inside, "Truth does not save us unless it costs us." She squeezed Lily's hand and stepped forward with a calm she did not feel. Daniel's smile glimmered like a blade wrapped in silk. The leader's quarters smelled of cedar and secrecy. Emily slipped inside during chore hour, counting the beats of her pulse like steps on a map. She opened drawers with a thief's prayer on her lips. Passports lay in a neat row, names she knew dressed in strangers' faces. Cash slept in envelopes bound with neat twine. A velvet pouch held the locket's twin and a ring engraved with Daniel's initials. She said, "You were never a shepherd," and closed her fist around the proof. A floorboard moaned, and the enforcer filled the doorway like a verdict. He did not speak at first. His jaw worked against a truth he hated. He finally said, "Put it down," but his voice cracked on the last word. Emily met his eyes and saw a storm that wanted to forget itself. She whispered, "You know," and the room shivered with the weight of admission. Footsteps whispered in the hall like a rumor that wanted teeth. The silent observer stepped in behind the enforcer, hands lifted in resignation. He said, "I told them you would come," and shame burned his cheeks. Emily felt the floor tilt as if the house confessed its slope. Daniel arrived with a smile arranged for witnesses. He said, "Temptation visits even the devout," and reached for the ring on the desk. Sarah burst in, breath ragged, and said, "She has proof," but 2 guards pinned her shoulders. The enforcer did not move to help, and that hurt worst of all. Emily held the passports up like a flare, saying, "He buys escapes for himself, not for us." Daniel's laugh was a velvet door closing. He murmured, "Witness the chaos that secrets breed," and the crowd that had gathered swallowed the lie like bread. They dragged Emily to the assembly room, so the lie could grow roots. Daniel stood upon the dais and spun a parable about wolves in borrowed wool. He called her a threat to the tender and a thief of peace. Emily felt fear reach for her throat and chose instead to speak. She said, "Lily was stolen from a mother who ran," and silence struck like lightning. The enforcer flinched, and the silent observer stared at the floor as if it could absolve him. Sarah shouted, "The ledgers prove it," and a murmur wavered like a tide against a cliff. Daniel lifted the ring and declared it a seal of sacred order. Emily saw Lily at the edge of the crowd, eyes bright with questions the doctrine could not swallow. She said, "Truth is the door you won't lock forever." The room trembled, not with faith, but with a crack beginning to spread. The assembly broke into chaos as Emily's words clung to the rafters like fire. Daniel roared, "Silence her," but his voice cracked under the weight of doubt in the crowd. Guards seized her arms, yet Sarah's shout cut through, "She speaks the truth." Lily's frightened cry pierced the moment, and Emily felt her heart break in rhythm with the sound. The enforcer stepped closer, torn between duty and conscience, his jaw trembling, as if holding back years of lies. Emily forced her breath steady, whispering, "Look at the proof, look at her." The silent observer's shoulders collapsed, and his lips parted like a confession, begging to surface. The air grew heavy, thick with a choice that could not be ignored. Emily's will was no longer hidden. It was a flame burning the script Daniel had written. She told herself, now or never, and the moment trembled on the edge of fracture. They dragged Emily through the compound, gravel biting her feet, but her voice refused to break. She shouted, "You are prisoners, not disciples," and each word shook the silence. Sarah struggled against her captors, screaming, "She's right, open your eyes." Daniel walked behind, his calm now sharp as broken glass. He whispered, "Fear is the chain, and I hold the key." The enforcer's hands twitched, fists unclenching, as if every strike he'd delivered weighed twice in memory. Lily ran beside, reaching for Emily's sleeve, pleading, "Don't let them hurt you." The crowd followed in fragments, torn between loyalty and doubt, faces pale in the torchlight. The silent observer moved closer, whispering words no one else heard. "I cannot stay silent anymore." The night itself felt restless, wind rushing through banners, warning of a storm ready to break. The barn once again became the stage, its walls soaked with memory of screams. Daniel raised his hand and declared, "Judgment restores order," his voice calm as poison. Emily stood chained to a post, her breath ragged, but her eyes blazing. She said, "Order built on lies will crumble." Sarah shouted from the crowd, "Let her speak," before being silenced with a blow. Lily sobbed, clutching her arms, her cry echoing like the innocence of every captive. The enforcer hesitated, whip in hand, eyes locked with Emily's. She whispered, "You know I'm right." And for a heartbeat the room held its breath. The silent observer stepped forward, trembling, and said, "The child is not his. I saw." Daniel's mask slipped, anger flaring, and his words spat fire. "Traitor!" The barn became more than wood and shadow. It became the crucible of rebellion. The room fractured as truth crashed against fear. Followers whispered, shifting uneasily, the chants faltering into silence. Daniel snarled, "Doubt is death." His mask cracked, fury spilling raw. Emily shouted, "Then let it kill me because I want Bao." Sarah twisted free for a moment, screaming, "Stand with her," and sparks lit in eyes across the crowd. Lily pushed forward, shouting, "She's my mother," her small voice cutting through the roar. The enforcer dropped the whip, the sound like thunder in the stillness. He turned to Daniel and growled, "No more." The silent observer sobbed openly, his frail body shaking, his voice repeating, "It was always a lie." The compound guards wavered, torn between command and conscience. Daniel's fury erupted, his hands shaking as he shouted, "You will burn for this defiance." The rebellion had taken root, unshakable, undeniable. Chaos exploded into action as Daniel lunged for Emily, fury spilling like fire. The enforcer blocked him, their bodies colliding with a sound that shook the rafters. Emily yanked free from her chains, the broken iron clattering to the floor. Lily ran into her arms, sobbing relief, her small body pressed tight. Sarah grabbed a lantern, swinging it wide, flames scattering shadows across the barn. The silent observer fell to his knees, muttering, "Free, free," as though the word itself unchained him. Daniel roared, his voice no longer divine but desperate, human, and vile. Emily whispered into Lily's hair, "We fight now, we survive now," and her voice trembled with power. The crowd surged, no longer silent, a tide of rebellion crashing against the false prophet. The climax had come, and nothing would remain unbroken. Smoke braided with night as the barn groaned, and Emily pulled Lily toward the door that had once caged them. Sarah hissed, "This way," guiding them through a seam of shadow and sparks. The enforcer blocked a falling beam with a roar that sounded like apology. He said, "Go," and the word cracked like a chain. Daniel's curses chased them, hot and venomous, but the crowd no longer bowed to his voice. The silent observer stumbled beside them, whispering names he could not say. Emily said, "Breathe," and counted 3 heartbeats for courage. Gravel bit their souls as they broke into the courtyard, wind ripping banners to shreds. Sirens far off trembled the air like hope learning to speak. "Aye." Emily squeezed Lily's hand and thought, "This is what rising feels like." They ran for the fence where weeds grew thicker than watchful eyes. Sarah knelt, whispering, "Foot here, then swing," as she laced fingers into a ladder of trust. Emily boosted Lily over and felt her arms shake with relief. The enforcer tore loose the wire with bare hands and a curse for every lie he had served. He said, "Debt begins here," and bled without complaint. Daniel's followers gathered at the threshold, unsure whether to give chase or kneel to the fire. The silent observer pressed a folded paper into Emily's palm, saying, "The mother's name." Emily tucked it close to her skin as if warmth could mend time. Beyond the fence, the river roared like a promise that finally chose them. Emily murmured, "We cross," and did not look back. Cold water clawed their shins as they waited, the current pulling like a memory that wanted them back. Lily whimpered, and Emily said, "Count the stars with me," though clouds erased the sky. Sarah took the lead, carving a path with stubborn shoulders. The enforcer moved behind, a wall against the dark breath, harsh but steady. On the far bank, sirens grew louder and a single flashlight bobbed with intention. A voice called, "This way," and Emily heard a steadiness she had not known in years. Daniel shouted from across the water, fragments of rage breaking on the current. The silent observer stopped, turned once, and bowed his head to the ruin. Emily said, "Forward," and the river finally let go. They reached the far bank and collapsed into reeds that smelled like rain and iron. The flashlight revealed a woman with calm eyes and a voice that did not tremble. She said, "I'm Maya. I've been tracking him for months," and passed blankets like verdicts. Emily held Lily close while Sarah watched the tree line with a blade of breath. The enforcer turned away, ashamed of the blood on his hands more than the wounds. The silent observer whispered, "I will testify," as if the vow might stitch him together. Maya said, "Names first, then safety," and Emily finally spoke them without fear. Somewhere, across the river, Daniel's rage thinned into distance. The sky lightened, fragile and honest. Emily tasted freedom as something raw, not sweet, and trusted it anyway. By noon they sat in a small clinic room that smelled of iodine and second chances. Maya made calls with the patience of someone who had learned to wait without surrender. Sarah paced, counting steps like a ward against doubt. The enforcer signed a statement with shaking hands, saying, "No more shadows, do." The silent observer stared at the wall until words formed, then gave every detail he had buried. Lily traced a sun on Emily's palm and whispered, "Are we safe?" Emily said, "Safer than yesterday, and let the truth be enough for now." Outside, children laughed, and the sound hurt in the right way. Emily looked at the folded paper and vowed to find the mother whose name it held. Freedom did not erase the chains, but it taught her how to carry them without bowing. Weeks later, Emily walked through a quiet street where children played freely, their laughter sharp against memories that still bled. Lily held her hand tighter, asking, "Will he find us?" Emily answered, "He cannot reach beyond his walls." The enforcer passed by in silence, working now as a mason, hands scarred but free. Sarah joined them, her eyes bright with fire still unquenched. The silent observer remained in the clinic, giving testimony until his voice cracked raw. Emily whispered, "Chains leave marks," but also felt the sun warm her skin, proof of a sky not owned by Daniel. Hope lived now, imperfect but breathing. Maya guided Emily into a courthouse, the air heavy with papers and oaths. She said, "Truth will not erase pain, but it builds walls he cannot cross." Emily stood before a desk and spoke Lily's story without trembling. Sarah sat behind, her hands clenched like anchors. The enforcer testified next, voice gravel but steady, saying, "I enforced lies. No more." The silent observer's words filled the room with ghosts, and the judge's pen scraped like thunder. Emily realized freedom was not just escape but confrontation. When she left, Lily hugged her waist and whispered, "You're brave," and Emily finally believed her. That night, Emily dreamed of the chants, echoing like waves against closed doors. She woke, gasping, the sound still clawing her ears. Lily slept beside her, breath even, safe in a way Emily still could not claim. She rose, stared at the window, and whispered, "Freedom doesn't silence the past." Sarah sat awake in the corner, sharpening resolve instead of blades. The enforcer smoked outside, smoke spiraling like unanswered prayers. The silent observer muttered in sleep, words broken into confessions even dreams could not hold. Emily pressed her palm to the glass, reminding herself the night could no longer trap her. Survival had become a scar she would carry, but also a shield. Morning broke with quiet, and Emily led Lily to the riverbank where freedom had first kissed them. The water shimmered silver, carrying fragments of ash far away. Lily asked, "Does it remember?" Emily knelt, whispering, "It remembers, but it also forgets." Sarah stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes sharp but softened by sunlight. The enforcer kept his distance, tossing stones into current, as if each throw was penance. The silent observer traced lines in sand, silent yet present. Maya said, "Healing isn't linear, but it is movement." Emily watched Lily skip a stone, laughter piercing the morning like a song. The river no longer roared, it sang. That night, Emily tucked Lily beneath a quilt and sat in silence. She whispered, "You are safe," though the words trembled with memory. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "We are not done, but we are not broken." The enforcer lingered by the door, a sentinel forged from guilt and resolve. The silent observer watched from a corner, his silence heavy but no longer hollow. Maya wrote in her notebook, the sound of pen against paper, grounding them all. Emily finally whispered into the dark, "I still hear them chanting in my dreams." And the room stilled. But Lily stirred, whispering, "I hear you more." For the first time, Emily believed the echo of love could outlast the chains.